The twin suns burned above the endless desert of Saharos. The sand stretched in every direction, glowing like molten gold. Wind carried sharp dust that stung the skin and filled the air with a dry hiss. No sound of life could be heard across the empty dunes except the weak breathing of one traveler and two great striped beasts walking beside her. Her name was Rena. She was tall and slender, her silver skin shimmering faintly under the light. Her eyes were bright blue, but they were now dull from exhaustion. The two beasts beside her, creatures with golden fur and dark stripes, looked like tigers from an ancient story. They were her protectors, her friends, and the only family she had left. Their heavy paws sank into the sand as they followed her step by step. For days they had searched for water. The old wells had dried, and the once lush valleys of Saharos were now nothing but dust. A great solar flare had hit their world 2 months ago, burning away the thin atmosphere and stealing the planet's moisture. What had once been a green world full of rivers was now a furnace of death. Rena's lips were cracked and her throat burned with dryness. Her tigers, Taro and Mira, walked slower each hour. Their tongues hung from their mouths and their golden eyes showed pain. Rena reached out and touched their heads, whispering softly to them, trying to give them comfort. Her voice was weak, almost lost in the wind, but they still listened. She had always believed that Saharos would survive, that the spirits of the desert would bring rain again. But now even her faith began to fade. She looked at the horizon and saw nothing but heat waves. No clouds, no shade, no sign of life. She stopped walking and fell to her knees. The sand burned her skin, but she did not care. She looked up to the twin suns and whispered, "Please, just one sign." Her voice broke with the effort. The tigers lay beside her, breathing heavily. When she opened her eyes again, something shimmered far ahead. It was not a mirage. The light reflected off something metallic. For a moment she thought it was another piece of old machinery half buried in sand. But then she noticed strange marks on its surface, sharp shapes and foreign letters. Her heart beat faster. She stood and began to walk toward it, pulling her tired body forward. Every step felt heavy, but hope gave her strength. The tigers followed, their paws dragging in the sand. As she came closer, she saw what it was. A metal craft half buried in the dunes, its surface scorched and cracked. Smoke still rose faintly from one of its engines. It was unlike anything she had seen. The design was foreign. Its color was silver with blue lines running along the sides. Near the entrance was a symbol she could not read, a circle of blue with small white stars inside. Rena touched the metal. It was warm, almost too hot to handle. She looked through a small window and her eyes widened. Inside, she saw a figure lying motionless near a console. It was not an alien from her world. The skin was light brown, the hair dark, and the body shape different. She pulled at the broken door until it gave way with a loud creak. The heat inside was worse than outside. She climbed in and knelt beside the figure. It was a human, though she had never met one before. She only knew of them from old stories told by traders, stories about a species from a blue planet who could survive anywhere, who could adapt to every world they touched. The man's face was covered with dust. His lips were dry and his breathing was shallow. His uniform was torn and a small metal tag hung around his neck. It had letters she could barely read, but one word stood clear. Mark. Rena placed her hand on his chest. He was still alive, but weak. She looked around the cabin and saw broken equipment scattered everywhere. A metal container lay near him, its surface cracked open. Inside was a clear liquid, water. Her eyes widened in shock. She had not seen pure water in weeks. Her throat screamed for it, her body begged, but she looked back at her tigers. They were lying outside the ship, too weak to move. Without thinking, she carried the container to them and poured a little water into a metal cup. They licked it slowly, their breathing easing slightly. Only after they had drunk did she allow herself a single sip. It felt like life returning to her body. Then she looked back at the man. She knew she could not leave him there. Whatever he was, he had fallen from the stars. And maybe, just maybe, he was a sign from the spirits she had prayed to. With the last of her strength, Rena dragged him out of the wreck and into the shade of a large rock. The tigers lay close, watching curiously. She tore a piece of cloth from her robe, soaked it with the remaining water, and touched it to his lips. At first, there was no reaction. Then his mouth moved slightly and he swallowed. She leaned closer and heard him whisper something in a rough voice. The words were strange, but she recognized a tone of pain and confusion. He opened his eyes for a second, staring at her face in disbelief, then closed them again. The suns began to lower in the sky, painting the desert in orange light. Rena built a small shade using metal pieces from the wreck. As darkness fell, the air cooled slightly. She stayed awake beside the man, making sure he breathed. The tigers rested nearby, too tired to move but comforted by her presence. During the night, Rena looked at the stars. They shimmered brighter now that the heat had faded. Somewhere up there, this human's home must exist, a blue world full of oceans and rain. She could not imagine such a place. To her, water had always been sacred, a treasure too rare to waste. She wondered how he had come here. Had his ship been shot down? Had he been exploring? Or was he running from something? Whatever the truth, he had brought a miracle with him, the knowledge and technology of another world. The next morning, when the first light of dawn touched the sand, Rena felt movement beside her. The man stirred, his fingers twitching. She turned quickly, holding the cup of water ready. His eyes opened slowly, blinking at the brightness. He looked at her face, confused but alive. He spoke again, his voice low and hoarse. "Where am I?" His language was strange, but through her translator band the words became clear. "You are on Saharos," she said softly. "You fell from the sky. You are safe now." He looked around, saw the two tigers lying nearby, and tried to sit up in alarm. Rena held out her hand. "Do not fear. They will not harm you. They are with me." He studied her face, still unsure. Then he nodded weakly. "Water," he whispered. She handed him the cup. He drank slowly, careful not to spill a single drop. When he finished, he looked at the dry land around them and frowned. "No rivers, no trees," Rena shook her head. "All gone. The suns took everything." He looked at the horizon and then at his broken ship. His face hardened as if a plan was forming. He touched a small device on his wrist, but it sparked and died. He sighed. Then he looked at her again. "My name is Mark," he said. "I am Rena," she replied. For the first time in many days, she smiled. It was faint, but it was real. A stranger had fallen from the stars, and he had brought with him something that her dying world had lost: hope. As the suns climbed higher again, Rena shaded her eyes and looked at the horizon. Somewhere deep inside, she felt that this meeting was not an accident. The desert had taken everything from her, but now it had given something back. A human had come, and the story of Saharos was about to change forever. When the suns rose again over the desert, the light spread like fire across the sand. Rena sat near the small shade she had built through the night, watching over the strange human she had rescued. His breathing had grown stronger, and his face was no longer as pale. The tigers, Taro and Mira, lay nearby, resting quietly after their hard journey. The human, Mark, moved slowly and opened his eyes fully this time. He blinked, looking around with confusion. His eyes were brown and sharp, but they softened when he saw Rena sitting beside him. She smiled gently, trying to ease his fear. "You are awake," she said. "You need water." He nodded, and she gave him a cup from the remaining supply. He drank carefully, his hands trembling. The tigers raised their heads and watched him, their golden eyes alert but calm. He looked at them with surprise. "Big cats," he whispered. "They are my friends," Rena said. "They will not harm you." He looked back at her and then at the endless sand. "Where am I?" he asked. "You are on Saharos," Rena replied. "Our world is dying. The heat grows stronger every season. The wells have dried." Mark sighed and pressed his forehead against his hand. "My ship crashed. I was mapping trade routes. The storm threw me off course. I thought this world was uninhabited." Rena looked at the broken ship, half buried in sand. "There are few of us left," she said softly. "Most left the planet when the storms began. The rest could not escape." He studied her for a moment. "You stayed?" "Yes," she said. "Someone must guard the sacred wells. They are part of our history. My family was among the last keepers. When the last water source dried, I tried to find another, but I failed." Her eyes fell to the sand and her voice grew quiet. "If not for you, we would have died too." Mark followed her gaze and saw the tigers lying weakly. He understood their condition at once. He stood still unsteady and walked to his broken ship. Inside the wreck, he searched through the compartments. He found a small device, a portable solar condenser, a human invention that pulled moisture from the air. The outer casing was cracked, but the main unit was still functional. He carried it outside and set it in the sand. Rena watched curiously as he adjusted the solar panels to face the suns. "What is that?" she asked. "It collects water from the air," Mark said. "Even here there is some moisture. It is slow, but it can save us." She watched as the small device hummed softly and began to glow. After some time, a single drop of clear water appeared inside the collection tube. Rena's eyes widened. She knelt to look closer, almost unable to believe what she saw. "You can make water from the air?" Mark smiled faintly. "Humans are good at finding ways to survive." He cleaned the collection pipe and started repairing the damage with pieces from his ship. His hands moved with precision even though his body was still weak. Rena handed him tools when he asked for them, learning how the machine worked. She was fascinated by his calmness and focus. By the time the suns reached their peak, the condenser produced a small but steady flow of water. Rena filled a metal bowl and placed it in front of her tigers. They drank slowly, their strength beginning to return. Rena felt tears in her eyes as she watched them recover. Mark sat down, exhausted but satisfied. "They will be fine soon," he said. "You gave them water before yourself," Rena said softly. He shrugged. "They looked worse than me," she smiled. "You are different from what I heard about humans. The old story said humans only take, but you give." He looked at her with tired eyes. "Sometimes we take, but when it matters, we try to help." For a while, they sat in silence. The wind moved softly across the dunes. The tigers lay near them, resting in peace. Rena looked at the shining device again. "If we can make more water, maybe others can live too," she said. Mark nodded slowly. "Maybe, but we need more power. This unit is small. My ship's battery is almost dead." He looked at the wreck and frowned. "If I can repair the solar grid, we can run the condenser full time." "I can help," Rena said quickly. He looked surprised. "You understand machines?" "My people once worked with desert harvesters." "I can learn fast," Mark gave a small smile. "Then let's start." Together they returned to the ship. Rena held the light while Mark connected wires and replaced damaged cells. She learned how to attach power conduits and adjust energy flow. He explained each step in simple words so she could follow. Her sharp mind understood quickly, and soon she was handing him the right parts before he even asked. When they finished, the solar grid began to hum again. The condenser's lights grew brighter and water started to fill a small container. Rena's face lit up with joy. "It works," she said. Mark nodded. "It will take time, but yes." They set up a small camp near the ship. Mark shared packets of dried human food, though he ate very little, giving more to Rena and the tigers. The taste was strange to her, but it gave strength. As the suns began to set, painting the desert sky in red and purple, Rena sat near the condenser, watching the slow drip of water. Mark sat beside her, his eyes on the horizon. "Back on Earth," he said softly, "we have oceans. Endless water. Sometimes we forget how lucky we are." "Oceans," Rena repeated, trying to imagine it. "So much water that you cannot see the end?" He nodded. "Yes, but even there, some people still thirst. Humans can create great things, but we also make mistakes." Rena looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "Then maybe this is your chance to make something right." He smiled at her words. "Maybe it is." The night grew cooler. They built a small fire from dried desert grass. The tigers lay close, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Above them, the stars covered the sky like diamonds. Rena pointed at them. "Do you know all their names?" she asked. Mark looked up. "Some of them. My people used to map them to find our way through space. That is how I ended up here." She nodded slowly. "Your world sounds far away." "It is," he said. "But maybe not unreachable." Rena turned toward him. "Do you wish to go back?" He hesitated. "Yes, but not yet. Not until I fix this." She studied his face, sensing something deeper behind his calm voice. "You are a soldier, aren't you?" He looked surprised. "How did you know?" "The way you move. The way you look around. You are always alert," she said. He gave a small laugh. "Old habits. I used to protect people. Then the mission changed. Now I only try to survive." "You still protect," she said softly. "You saved us." The wind carried her words into the night. Mark said nothing, but there was warmth in his eyes. He had seen many worlds, fought many battles, but he had never met someone like Rena, calm, brave, and kind, even when her world was falling apart. The next morning, the desert looked less deadly. A small patch of damp sand had formed near the condenser, and Rena's plants stored in tiny clay pots showed new life. She smiled when she saw the first green leaf pushing through the soil. Mark looked at her and said, "We can build something bigger. If we find another condenser, we can make a small oasis." Rena's eyes brightened. "There was a city once not far from here. The old wells might still have machines. I can take you there." He packed his tools and checked his weapon just in case of danger. "Then let's go," he said. Rena called her tigers. They rose stronger now and followed beside them as they began walking toward the horizon. The sun shone above them, but for the first time in months, Rena did not fear the light. As they walked, the wind carried new hope across the dunes. A human from the stars had come to a dying world, and he had given water to the desert. It was the beginning of a story that would change not only Saharos but the bond between two species forever. The suns were high above the dunes, glowing like twin fires in the empty sky. The desert wind moved softly, carrying the smell of sand and metal. Rena walked ahead, her long silver hair tied behind her head to keep it from blowing into her face. Behind her walked Mark, carrying a metal pack filled with tools, batteries, and small containers of water. Beside them, the two tigers moved in silence, their paws sinking into the golden sand with each step. They had been walking for hours toward the ruins Rena had spoken of. It was once a thriving city called Delora, built near underground wells that had long since dried up. The wind had buried most of it under the dunes, but Rena believed that machines might still rest beneath the sand. Machines that could bring life back to her dying world. Mark stopped for a moment to check the signal from his scanner. The small screen blinked weakly, showing the outline of the terrain. "We are getting closer," he said. "The metal density is high ahead. That means buildings or storage." Rena turned to him and nodded. Sweat glistened on her forehead, but her eyes were full of determination. "Then we must hurry before the suns reach the middle sky. The heat will be too strong." They pressed forward. Taro and Mira walked beside Rena, their tails swaying gently. The tigers had regained their strength, and their eyes now shone with bright life. Every few steps, Rena reached down to pat their heads, reminding them they were safe. Mark watched her quietly. He admired how she moved through the desert with confidence, knowing every sign and shadow. She knew how to find safe ground, how to read wind patterns, and how to sense when a storm was near. Even though her world was dying, she walked with the calm of someone who refused to give up. After another long hour, the sand began to change color. It grew darker and firmer under their feet. Strange metal shapes started to appear half buried in the ground. Rena pointed at one. "Delora begins here," she said softly. Mark knelt beside a large metal archway buried in the sand. He brushed off the dust and saw ancient markings carved into the surface. "These look like control symbols," he said. "If we find a power source, maybe we can open it." Together, they began to clear the area. Mark used a small energy cutter from his toolkit to remove the outer panels. Rena helped by sweeping away sand and checking the markings. After some time, Mark found a round hatch under the archway. It was sealed tight but still intact. Rena touched the metal and said, "My people built Delora with strong hands. Even time could not destroy it." Mark connected his battery to the hatch. Sparks flew and a small light blinked. The door opened slowly with a deep groan. A wave of cool air brushed their faces. They stepped inside. The tunnel was dark, but Mark switched on his wrist light, revealing smooth metal walls covered in dust. The air smelled stale but breathable. They moved carefully through the narrow passage until it opened into a wide underground chamber. The room was filled with machines, pipes, and tanks. Most were broken, but some still looked functional. In the center stood a large cylindrical structure. Rena's eyes widened. "That is a water core," she whispered. "If it still works, it could bring life to the whole region." Mark walked around it, checking the control panel. "It needs power," he said. "If we connect my ship's solar battery, we might be able to restart it." He opened his pack and began working. Rena stood beside him, handing him tools as he asked for them. She could see how focused he was, how every movement had purpose. His hands were steady, his eyes calm. When he finished, he connected the final wire and flipped a switch. The machines hummed faintly, lights flickering along the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling as the water core began to glow with a soft blue light. Rena's heart raced. "It is alive," she whispered. Mark checked the pressure gauges. It is drawing moisture from underground. Slow, but it is working. They waited. After several minutes, a small stream of clear water began to flow from a pipe into a basin. Rena knelt beside it, touching the water with trembling hands. Tears filled her eyes. I never thought I would see this again. Mark smiled. Now you have your well back. Rena looked up at him. No, we have it. You made this possible. They filled several containers and gave some to the tigers. Taro and Mira drank happily, purring deeply as their tails brushed against Rena's legs. The sound filled the chamber like soft thunder. Mark took a small sip, feeling the coolness against his throat. It is good, he said. They stayed in the chamber until the suns began to lower. Mark checked his scanner again. This area has potential. If we repair the other cores, we can build an oasis here. Rena nodded. My people believed Delora was sacred. Maybe this is why. Maybe it was meant to live again. As they packed up to leave, Rena noticed something glowing in the corner. It was a small data console still running on minimal power. She wiped the dust away and tapped the surface. A faint projection appeared, a map of the region. Mark leaned closer. This shows the old water network, he said. There are at least 6 more cores like this one. Rena smiled. Then we will fix them all. Mark nodded, but his face turned serious. We need to move carefully. By-ship's signal might have been detected. Someone could come. Rena frowned. Who would come here? Raiders, he said. In many systems, scavengers follow crash signals. They come to take technology or capture survivors. Rena looked around the chamber, fear rising in her chest. We must hide this place. Mark began to cover the entrance with sand and metal panels. For now, no one will find it. But we need to prepare. When they returned to the surface, the night was falling. The desert sky turned deep violet and stars began to appear. The heat faded, replaced by a gentle cold wind. They built a small camp near a cluster of rocks. Rena gathered dried roots and started a small fire. Mark checked his equipment and made sure the condenser was still working. Water continued to drip into the container beside it. Rena sat beside the fire, watching the flames dance. The tigers lay near her, their eyes glowing softly in the dark. She looked at Mark and said, You could have left after fixing your ship, but you stayed. Why? Mark looked at the fire for a long moment before answering. Because I have seen many dying worlds. Most I could not save. But this one still has a chance. Rena listened to his quiet voice. You believe that? He nodded. I have seen humans rebuild cities after storms, forests after fire, even lives after war. We learn to fight back. Maybe it is time this world learns that too. Rena smiled faintly. Then we will fight together. They ate a small meal in silence. The stars shone above them like silver dust. Rena pointed at one bright cluster and said, That star once guided our ancestors. We called it the Path of Rain. Mark looked up. On Earth, we have a star called Polaris. It helps travelers find their way home. Maybe your star guided you here, Rena said softly. He looked at her and smiled. Maybe. As the night deepened, the wind carried soft sounds across the desert. The tigers slept beside the fire. Rena leaned against a rock, her eyes heavy but peaceful. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. Mark stayed awake a little longer, scanning the horizon with his binoculars. Far away, he saw faint flashes of light, signals, maybe ships. He frowned but said nothing. Tomorrow they would start early, heading to the next site on the map. He would not let danger stop what they had begun. He looked at Rena sleeping beside her tigers, her face calm in the light of the fire. There was strength in her even when she was silent. He thought of Earth and how his people once fought for survival just like this. Different worlds, same spirit. When he finally lay down, the desert wind moved softly over the camp, carrying the scent of water from the underground well. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if watching over them. In that quiet night, a human and an alien shared the same dream, to bring life back to a dying world. The desert stretched endlessly, glowing faintly under the twin suns. Rena led the way, her silver hair shimmering in the morning light. Taro and Mira walked beside her, their striped fur reflecting gold as they moved silently across the dunes. Mark followed closely, carrying tools, batteries, and the scanner that had guided them to Delora's hidden wells. They had worked tirelessly since discovering the first water core. 2 more underground chambers had been repaired, and water now flowed steadily in small streams across the desert floor. Green shoots of plants were beginning to sprout near the basins. Life was returning slowly, a miracle that few could have imagined. Rena walked ahead, her eyes scanning the horizon. She had a deep knowledge of the desert, sensing danger long before it arrived. Her tigers moved with silent precision, their paws leaving soft imprints in the sand. Mark followed, checking the signal from his scanner. It showed faint signs of movement far beyond the dunes. "Something is coming," he said quietly. Rena stopped and looked at him. "What do you see?" "Small lights," he replied. "Far away but approaching. They are not natural. My guess is raiders or scavengers." Her eyes narrowed. "Raiders? People who take what does not belong to them," Mark said. "Technology, food, water, they follow signals looking for anything they can use or sell." Rena took a deep breath. Her hands rested on the tigers' heads. "We cannot let them find the cores, not yet. If they do, our water will be stolen. Many will die," Mark nodded. "We can prepare. I have tools and you have knowledge of the land. Together we can make a defense." They returned to the closest water chamber. Mark began assembling barricades using metal from his crashed ship and parts found in Delora. He taught Rena how to arrange them to create choke points. Rena learned quickly, her hands moving with skill and precision. The tigers paced along the perimeter, their eyes sharp and alert. As the suns climbed higher, the lights on the horizon grew brighter. Mark checked the scanner again. "They are closer. Probably a small fleet of drones and vehicles. They may attack soon." Rena's voice was steady. "Then we fight. We protect what remains." Mark studied her for a moment. He had seen many battles on different worlds, but there was a strength in Rena he had never encountered. Calm, determined, and fearless. She was not a soldier, yet she commanded presence. When the enemy arrived, it was faster than expected. Drones appeared first, small machines hovering over the dunes, scanning for life. The tigers growled and crouched low, ready to leap. Rena gave a low whistle, signaling them to flank the approaching drones. Mark took a deep breath. He had trained for this, but the desert added new challenges. The sand shifted beneath his feet, making it hard to aim his energy blaster. He moved quickly, taking cover behind metal panels. Sparks flew as drones fired pulses of light across the sand. Rena moved beside him, her hands steady. Using devices from Delora, she activated traps around the perimeter. Sand pits opened under the drones, catching several before they could attack. Taro and Mira leaped into the fray, their claws striking metal and wires, sending sparks flying. Mark adjusted his aim, targeting the control units on the drones. One by one, they fell from the sky, spinning and crashing into the dunes. Rena continued to guide the tigers, using hand signals she had learned over years of survival. Together they moved like a single unit, precise and unstoppable. The battle lasted for hours. The sun reached its peak, casting harsh shadows across the desert. The enemy vehicles attempted to advance, but the traps slowed them down. Mark used his knowledge of technology to disable several vehicles remotely, causing them to stall in the sand. Rena's mind was focused. Every movement had purpose. She shouted directions to the tigers, who attacked with perfect timing. Sparks flew as claws met metal, and the ground shook as vehicles toppled into the sand. Finally, the last drone fell from the sky, spinning into a soft heap on the desert floor. Mark wiped sweat from his brow and checked the remaining signals. The enemy fleet had retreated, their numbers scattered across the dunes. The desert was silent again. Rena breathed deeply, kneeling beside Taro and Mira. "They are safe," she whispered. Mark came over and joined her. "That was close," he said. "Too close. They will try again if they find out the cores are still working." Rena looked at the streams of water flowing through the desert basins. Green shoots swayed in the soft breeze. "Then we must hide the chambers better. They cannot see them from above." "The desert must protect us," Mark nodded. "I can create camouflages. We can cover entrances, make false signals, and slow anyone who comes near. With these defenses, we can buy time." They worked together, covering the entrances to the chambers with sand, metal, and debris from the ruins. Mark taught Rena how to create false energy signatures to confuse scanners. She learned quickly, her mind absorbing every instruction. Taro and Mira patrolled silently around them, always alert. As night fell, the desert grew cold. The stars appeared above, bright and steady. Rena and Mark sat beside the fire, exhausted but alive. The tigers lay close, their breathing calm and steady. "You were amazing today," Rena said softly. Mark shook his head. "I had help. Your tigers and you made all the difference." I could not have done this alone, Rena smiled. We are stronger together. That is how life survives in the desert. Mark nodded, looking at the stars. On Earth, we have stories about humans working with animals, forming bonds that cannot be broken. I see that now. You and your tigers are incredible. Rena reached out and patted Taro's head. They are more than animals. They are my family. Mark studied her face in the firelight. Your people built this world with care. Even now, your strength and courage are remarkable. Most would have given up long ago. She looked at him, her eyes steady. I did not give up. I could not. Not when life still has a chance. They ate a small meal, sharing rations of water and dried food. Mark spoke quietly of his home world, describing oceans, forests, and green fields. Rena listened, imagining what it must be like to live where water flows freely and plants grow without struggle. It is beautiful, she said finally. I wish my world could have been like that. Mark placed his hand gently on hers. Maybe it can be again. We are building something new here. Together we can bring life back to the desert. Rena smiled faintly. I hope so. For the tigers, for the plants, and for the people who may return one day. The wind moved softly across the dunes, carrying the scent of water from the underground cores. The desert seemed to listen, quiet and alive. Rena leaned back against a rock, her eyes heavy but peaceful. Mark stayed awake a little longer, keeping watch, ensuring that no one approached during the night. Above them, the stars shone with clarity. The desert, once a place of death and despair, now held hope. A human from the stars had fought beside an alien, protecting life and teaching the desert its value once again. Rena looked at the tigers sleeping beside her. Their breathing was calm, their eyes closed. She whispered softly, "We will survive. Together we will bring life back." Mark watched her, feeling the truth in her words. His own experiences across planets had taught him that hope was fragile but powerful. With determination, courage, and unity, even the most dying worlds could be saved. The night deepened, and the desert became a quiet sanctuary. Water flowed gently through hidden channels. The green shoots of plants swayed in the soft breeze. Life was returning, one small step at a time. The human and the alien, bound by trust and purpose, had created a partnership stronger than any army. Together they would face what came next, knowing that survival depended not just on strength but on intelligence, courage, and the bond between species. The desert of Saharos had found its protectors, and its story of rebirth was only beginning. The suns of Saharos rose slowly over the desert, spreading golden light across the dunes. The once barren landscape had begun to transform. Streams of water flowed gently from the underground cores that Rena and Mark had repaired. Tiny green shoots of plants swayed in the breeze. Dusty rocks glistened with moisture, and the soft sound of flowing water echoed through the dunes. Rena stood at the edge of the largest basin, her tigers beside her. Taro and Mira were now strong and alert, their golden eyes scanning the surroundings. Their fur shone in the sunlight, wet from drinking, and their tails moved gently as they rested near the water. Rena bent to touch the surface of the pool. The water was cool and clear, reflecting her silver hair. Mark approached her, carrying a small container filled with fresh water. "It is growing," he said. "The desert is beginning to live again." Rena looked at him, her eyes bright. "We did this together. The tigers, the water, and you." He shook his head. "You did most of it. I just helped." She smiled, shaking her head. "No, it was all of us. Together." The wind moved softly through the oasis, carrying the scent of wet sand and fresh plants. It was quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the harsh, empty desert they had once walked through. Birds of small species drawn by the water landed near the basins, chirping and drinking. Insects buzzed softly as life returned slowly to the barren land. Rena watched with wonder. "I did not think I would see this again," she said quietly. "The world, it is alive." Mark placed a hand on her shoulder. "It will live as long as we protect it." Rena nodded. "We must do more. There are other cores to repair, other areas to bring back to life. This oasis can grow into something bigger, a place where people and animals can survive." Mark studied the horizon. "We should build defenses too. Others may come, attracted by water and life. We need to be ready." Rena's eyes narrowed. "We will. The desert is strong, but we can make it stronger." They began walking along the newly flowing streams, checking the smaller cores. Some had minor damages, others had collapsed pipes. Together they worked to repair them. Rena used her knowledge of Delora's technology, showing Mark how to adjust the old valves and activate the hidden machinery. Mark used his human tools and devices to enhance the efficiency of the system. Hours passed as they labored under the suns. The tigers stayed close, resting when needed but always alert, guarding the oasis. By the afternoon, several more streams of water flowed into the larger basins. The oasis was no longer just a single pool. It was spreading, life returning in patches of green, bringing hope to a land that had been empty for too long. Rena stepped back and admired their work. "This is just the beginning," she said. "One day the desert will not be empty. Life will flourish." Mark nodded. "Humans are survivors, and so are you. Together, we can bring this world back." As the suns began to set, painting the sky in orange and purple, distant shapes appeared on the horizon. Rena's eyes widened. "Travelers," she whispered. "Other creatures, maybe even people." Mark raised his hand, signaling the tigers to stay calm. The shapes approached slowly. Small animals drawn by water moved first. Then came wanderers, cautious but curious. They were desert dwellers, alien species who had survived the harsh climate. Their eyes widened at the sight of water and green plants. Rena stepped forward. "Welcome," she said gently. "There is water and safety here." Mark stood beside her, watching the newcomers. "They will learn quickly," he said. "This place can grow into a true oasis for all who need it." The newcomers drank from the streams, their excitement and relief evident. The desert was no longer a place of death. It was becoming a sanctuary. Night fell and the oasis glowed softly under the stars. The water reflected the light, casting silver ripples across the sand. Rena sat beside the largest basin, Taro and Mira lying at her side. Mark joined her, placing a small fire between them. They were silent for a moment, listening to the gentle sound of water. The tiger's breathing was calm, the newcomers resting nearby. Life had returned, slowly but surely. Rena spoke softly. "I never imagined this. I thought my world would die and all would be lost." Mark shook his head. "It was not lost, not yet. You believed, you fought, and you never gave up. That is why it lives again." She looked at him, her eyes bright. "You came from the stars. You brought knowledge, hope, and courage. You saved the tigers, and you saved me." He smiled faintly. "I did not save you. We saved each other. This world has strength too. It only needed a chance." Rena nodded, understanding. They had both faced the harsh desert, fought the enemy, repaired the ancient technology, and now brought life back. The human and the alien, together with the tigers, had changed the course of their world. The stars above were bright, as if acknowledging their victory. The wind carried the scent of water and growing plants. Small creatures moved through the new grass, and the desert seemed to hum with life. Mark looked at the horizon. "One day people will come here. They will see what we have done. They will learn from it. Maybe they will stay and help the desert grow." Rena smiled. "Then our work will continue. Life will spread. The desert will no longer be empty." They sat quietly, watching the water flow and the plants sway in the breeze. The tigers rested, alert but peaceful. The newcomers moved gently, exploring the oasis and drinking from the basins. Rena whispered, "We gave life back to the desert. And one day it will give life to others." Mark nodded, a calm satisfaction on his face. "This is what humans do. We find hope where none exists and we protect it. Together we can rebuild worlds." The night deepened, the stars shining over the oasis, casting silver light across the water. Rena looked at Mark, then at her tigers. "Thank you," she said simply. Mark shook his head. "No, thank you. You never gave up and you taught me the strength of your people." The desert had been harsh, unforgiving, and empty, but now water flowed, plants grew, and life returned. The human, the alien, and her tigers had brought hope to a dying world. And as they rested under the stars, a sense of peace settled over the oasis. The desert of Saharas had found its protectors, and its story of rebirth had begun. A story that would be told for generations, of courage, unity, and the power of life. The oasis glowed softly, reflecting the bond between two species and the creatures who had survived together. The desert was alive and hope had returned.